Hello my friends, welcome to a brand new episode of This Week in Social Media. This week we're going to be talking about the start of the Mr. Beast controversy and drama. We're going to be talking about the fact that YouTube was the first streaming platform to get 10% on TV watching. We're also going to be talking about our feelings and some of the data around X being quote-unquote brand unsafe, or brands feeling that it is unsafe to advertise on. We also share some updates on the X Brazil ban and what took place over the weekend. We also share a little bit of Reels growth advice on Instagram. And we also share some TikTok news, a little bit on the ban, but also some safety updates. On the 24th of July, DogPact404 published a video that went crazy viral. At the time of filming, has 15 million views, and you'll understand briefly why, because it's addressing the largest YouTuber on the planet, that is Mr. Beast, and his alleged incriminality, faking videos, those kind of things. And I wanted to talk about it, share some of my views on it. So within this video, Mr. Beast specifically acknowledges, or a clip is used where he specifically acknowledges that he's aware that a large number of his subscriber bases are below the ages of 18. This will become slightly more relevant in due course.
The average demographic is what, 13 through 17? Is that the biggest spike in your analytics?
Well, I mean, mine's horseshit. It says like 18 to 24, but I know all my fucking viewers are little kids.
Yeah. I mean,
I feel like it's a lot like that because, you know, little kids lie about their age or they're on their, you know, like...
But yeah, and then I have like a fucking massive one for like the 40-year-old range because all the fucking idiots are on their parents.
And within the same video, another clip is shown where he shows someone who he just finds on the street or just walks down the road in America and just hands $1,000 to.
Is he subscribed? You are subscribed. Here's some money. Have a good day.
Some of them feel like I just walk around with $1,000. It's like, oh, thanks for watching my videos.
Hit that subscribe button because you might bump into me in real life and it might make you a lot of money.
Right? And it's this illusion or this reality where if you subscribe, you can be one of the lucky ones to either be in a video or be, you know, lucky enough to win some money, or there is even some claims about winning a car or house, etc. These bold claims about specific things. And the video also talks about as well that Mr. Beast allegedly does or doesn't fake videos. Now the question I want to bring is, this is the reason why, firstly, like, his videos being faked is either a big deal or not, is he builds his brand, and he has built his brand on being a reputationable, or someone, yeah, you can trust what I say. Yeah, you can trust that what I'm saying is true and authentic. You know, in a similar way to a lot of businesses and a lot of people would want to be trusted in their view of the news. I would hope by listening to this show that you would trust my opinion because you see me as a good source of information, and hopefully that you can believe at minimum I've done a level of research on this information. But as always, you know, all of the sources that I do use in this video will be linked in the description down below. But that's part of Mr. Beast's brand. And the video alleges that because he uses CGI to emulate or increase the production value, or other things like, you know, using trained animals, so in this case it was a raccoon, to add to the production, I guess the question becomes, which is, how is it fair for us? Is it not fair for us to say that the video is quote-unquote faked when it's in a controlled environment, right? Is it faked because he's using CGI to expand those sets? Some would say yeah, some would say no. Personally, I think it's a grey area, to be honest, because all he's doing, as far as I'm concerned, is he's increasing that entertainment value, he's increasing that production quality, which in turn, by using CGI, means he can do specific things. And for me as a consumer, when I watch some of his content, you know, his kind of going from challenge 1 to challenge 2 scenes are deliberately, obviously CGI, and they are a bit piss take. You know, he blows up, you know, in some of them, if I recall correctly, he blows up like half a planet, or he blows up the moon, or things like this. It's like, well, clearly he's not doing that. Clearly that's CG. And the question comes in this video, or the question I want to add to this video is, in doing that, is he quote-unquote faking the video? The same in true of when it comes to using a train set animal. So in this case, it was in the video, I think Doug Pat specifically described it as a paid actor, but the crux is it's known in the film production world that, you know, if you want to have animals on set and you want them to be able to behave in a certain way, there is animals that are trained to do this, right? They're not wild, right? When you deal with a wild animal, they're very unpredictable, right? In the same way, the saying comes is don't work with children and animals because they are so unpredictable. They are more difficult to work with, right? And is it fair, if the animal is a key part of that video, to necessarily try and use a wild animal? Because in most cases, what the wild animal is going to do is, if it sees a human, in most cases it's going to run away, right, or be semi-aggressive or panicked, etc., because it's questioning, are you going to kill me or not, right? When in a trained animal's case, the trainer will be with them. They'll be in a more trained or relaxed mode, and they're more likely to be able to be I imagine, through like giving treats and other forms of psychological quote-unquote tricks, to be able to do what the production is looking for that animal to do, right? So is that again making it more practical for production? Is that quote-unquote faking it because there wasn't a wild animal? But again, I would argue that it's not practical to have a wild raccoon, and or probably safe, to be honest with you, to have a real a wild raccoon on set when it's only a small part of that video as well. There is also a abandoned video, or a video which was deliberately designed to be, we are stranded on X place, right? And it was notoriously known and notoriously talked about that the area was closed off for Mr. Beast to film, right? Because there isn't actually many places on the planet, unless you go like really, really, really vast areas. I think there's a couple of areas in Russia and places like that are really, really extreme and far away, where you can be in the middle of nowhere, next to like nowhere in society. And I think the whole premise of the video was that we're going to create an environment and see how the characters, the people within the video, are specifically looking at or specifically react to being in a survivalistic style environment, right? And that's the entertainment. Some people, for whatever reason, I've never personally understood it, but some people really like watching other people suffer. It's a bit weird in my opinion, but there we go. So the claim that in Doug Pat's video, he claims that you can get it's a 20-minute taxi ride to get to the nearest airport. Well, yeah, of course, because where else would you do that? That's actually one of the best places if you can make it look kind of abandoned, and it is potentially already quite abandoned and quite ruined, and it's quite convenient because it is only a 20-minute plane ride. Or a taxi ride, excuse me, to the airport. Then that makes logistical easiness of creating the content, right? And I guess again it comes back to this: is that faking it, or is that just what happens in production, right? It's clearly a staged production or a social experiment, you could say, and it's that style of content. So in that regard, is creating this environment classed as faking a video? I don't personally believe so. I would say it's about creating the environment so you can see these characters and you can see these realities. It's not a fully scripted show. I don't see them as the same thing. Increasing production quality, producing a piece that requires trained animals, requires etc., is going to be different to we're doing a social experiment on the street. Right, and it's meant to be street feel, and it's meant to be that way. No, it's not as scripted or as planned or as shot listed out as a full production on a film set, for example, would be. But again, I don't think it goes into the lines of faking at what I've talked about now. Now, there is also being questions where he talks later in the video about his claims related to the 100 Girls, 100 Boys video that he did, where if the boys, and I quote, if the boys would have won, it would have been a PR nightmare. Now, it probably could have been, because especially in the world at the moment, where a lot of people are being portrayed or implied, and we are in a reality where the culture is about trying to find an equal playing field for all genders. If the boys would potentially have won, that could have potentially, you know, you could have seen it now, Mr. Beast the misogynist, or etc, etc, those kind of headlines. And I think that is true, but is it, again, and this is where it starts, in my opinion, I think, where the wrongdoing actually potentially starts to appear, and where the hot water really, not necessarily, in some cases legally, but also not legally. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know where it legally sits, but it is morally, at least in my opinion, quite dodgy in this next sequence, because obviously the rigging of the show. So there was a part of the show where one of the challenges was for a group to complete a bunch of Rubik's cubes, right? And part of what Mr. Beast does in his game shows, no matter how legitimate or not, is he will just randomly appear with a briefcase full of like $10,000 or etc, $1,000, etc, and in this video he pays off, allegedly, the only guy who knew how to solve a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah, but
we didn't realize until this competition started that only one boy,
oh, they're literally handing it to him,
and only one girl actually knew how to solve a Rubik's Cube.
Out of all these guys, he's the only one that learned how to solve a Rubik's Cube.
And he stayed.
Oh, I'm not leaving.
And since the boys were getting way ahead of the girls, I decided to make things interesting. We're gonna offer the one guy in there that knows how to solve them $10,000 to leave right now.
I love how he's still solving. We got 10 grand right here. You can just walk out the circle.
Do it,
I'm out.
It's 10 grand. I would leave.
10K, 10K. The boys were blowing you out of the water. I paid the one guy who knew how to solve them to leave. Now if you don't win, that was all for nothing. So win for me.
Right, therefore, staggering the odds in the females' favour, as in this 100 girls, 100 boys' favour. And I think that is, now we're talking into manipulation standpoint. Now, is it wrong or right? I'll let you decide whether you think that's a wrong or right decision, considering the quote-unquote PR nightmare that it would have been for Mr. Beast. But again, how do we frame it? How do we think about it when it comes to the entertainment level of content? And Dogpack, to be fair to him, did say as a counter-argument, well, it's entertainment, it's fun, etc. And I think for me, there's a difference between deliberately trying to change the outcome of a competition and increasing the production quality. For me, they're two separate things. I think one is more fair than the other. But I would love to hear what you think in the comment section down below. And next week we will also be covering the next section, or our next part of the first video, and then moving on to the second video and third video, etc. That do also, you know, imply or showcase some a lot worse that allegedly has taken place. And I'll be sharing my thoughts and opinions on that. But in other YouTube news, we got the news a couple of weeks ago that a new study found that YouTube specifically made up 10.4% of all TV viewing. This is great to see, but also it's likely to increase your watch time if you're a YouTube creator. And I was listening to a very well-known YouTuber's podcast, whose links I'll leave down in the description as well, who did the same or shared the same or hold the same view, and he's notoriously known as running a magic channel that has 1 million subs as well. But also it seems to be the collective view that because of the friction on TV in regards to, I'm going to open a video, so if you're watching this video on a telly, thank you, because it's likely that the watch time on this video will be increased because of the friction that you have on a telly, when if you were using your phone, the ease of, oh, this video's shit, I'm going to click off, is lower than on a telly, because on a telly you've got to really commit to watching the video, but then also getting out of that video and getting into a new piece, even if you're on the YouTube app, is harder than on a computer or on the phone as well. And then also this study also talked a little bit about the reporting that younger viewers don't watch traditional telly anymore, with legacy media slowly dying out with every generation, end quote. Does this mean that it will become an unpaid platform, so undervalued in respect to traditional TV advertising? Perhaps. But what it does look like, and what the articles and the research I've done for this story looks like, is that the brands that want to connect with an older demographic are still leaning into television. They're still leaning into legacy, you know, your BBCs, your ITVs, your Channel 4s, your Channel 5s, advertising spots, and paying that big money to be on those spots, and I imagine throwing a lot of money at the production as well, and of course the planning and the strategy that goes into those ads. But what we're actually seeing is the quote-unquote rise, or the use of YouTube and social media to gain that brand awareness is actually really, really starting to rise, because the quote-unquote young generation who all grew up are now 20, nearly 30, right, etc. We, just speaking personally, we grew up with YouTube. We didn't grow up necessarily with legacy media. And I think if you're slightly older, you remember when there was only certain amounts of telly on, and there was only certain amounts of time when telly was on, and that's where I think it comes from. It comes from what TV, and that nostalgic view of what TV used to be. But YouTube specifically, its ad platform as well, and this does kind of link into our following story, but YouTube sounds, to quote my notes, it sounds like that YouTube is becoming one of the best platforms to use to build brand awareness versus TV or other traditional platforms, allowing you to be able to, quote, use more advanced targeting and specific your audience to help reduce your ad costs, end quote. And that's, I think, one of the key things. And I know there's going to be this conversation around what Sky's doing with ad smart targeting as well. And that is powerful and can be used. But I think there's nothing quite like building a community around your content on YouTube, on social media. And again, it comes back to that key value add. But are we going to see a shift? Are we going to see a thing? But clearly, the pendulum is swinging towards YouTube becoming more and more used on your games consoles, on your tellies, whether that's through a smart tellies app or using, you know, your PlayStations, your Xboxes, etc., to watch YouTube through. And what does that actually mean for you to create content specifically? And also then, where do you put that content from an advertising point of view? Are you going to put ads on YouTube? Are you thinking about it? Let me know in the comment section down below. In semi-connected news, I read an article this week from the Financial Times that talked all about businesses start to cut advertising revenue from X as it's worried as to, quote, not be brand safe. Because of the extremist or extreme content that is on the platform. And this is in semi-linked news to the freedom of speech debate, conversation, reality that Elon is having at the moment with Brazil that we'll come on to in the next story. So if you're more interested in that, feel free to click over. But in specific news about advertising spend and what it looks like for next year for X and what that could mean for the platform, I would like to read you a couple of quotes from the Financial Times specifically. A record number of advertisers plan to pull back from X next year because of concerns over being associated with extreme content, in a new blow to Elon Musk's hopes to turn the finances of the social media group. End quote. So what this is talking about is the percentage of businesses that feel that X is a worthwhile platform to A, get return on your pounds and dollars spent on advertising, but also number two, what could be the brand reputational damage or benefit of advertising on X. And as this quote implies, and as this quote says, and there has been quite a lot of concern around the extremist content on X, is that going to hurt Elon's chance of advertising? You know, we saw this in the adpocalypse from a couple of years ago with YouTube, where it was alleged that, you know, your big brands, your Coca-Colas, your Nikes, etc., their ads were going against quote-unquote terrorist videos or other very dicey content on YouTube, and YouTube stamped it out. And the only reason why YouTube was able or went out of its way to stamp it out was because advertisers pulled back. Will we see a reality? Will we see a about turn potentially on some of Elon's views? Because as I've looked into his policies on removing accounts and not removing accounts, it seems to be rather grey in the respect to sometimes it's freedom of speech and that's why you're staying here. Other times it's actually I just don't like you, so you're not going to be on my platform. Is that fair? And this is something we're going to talk about a little bit more in next week's show, about some of the the non-consistencies, you could say, with Elon's approach regarding X at the moment. Also, so this is also another reason why I think we've seen Elon specifically leaning into some of those other features. He's really leaning into that everything app kind of conversation that we mentioned in last week's show, but also that's why he started Twitter Blue. That's why he started the Premium Plus reality, or the Premium Plus benefits that X users can benefit from, because they are basically going to subsidize or potentially replace advertising revenue from the platform. And as a business owner who started using X for this show as well, I've also now been getting pushed basically advertising credit bundles related to advertising on X. So clearly there is a push by X to get people to still talk, still advertise, still create content. And I know that he is developing plans to pay people to go exclusively on X. Now, would he look at maybe talking to people or adding that deal or having that deal for people who he politically agrees with? Perhaps. Would he potentially look for quite controversial figures deliberately for those deals or for that as a promotional tool? Because notoriously known for many years in marketing is that if you are controversial, quote unquote controversial, then of course you can gain a lot of attention because people are going to be outraged in what you say. Is that a strategy he would use? Is that a strategy he may use? We don't know, of course, but it does look like potentially in 2025 that X could be in some financial difficulty, right? Is this actually more of a sign around the realities of the economic world at the moment? Is it people are pulling back on advertisers? Maybe. Maybe not. These are some things to think about when it's, when we're looking at a story that just says that X is specifically, quote unquote, perceived as non-brand safe, or not safe for a brand to potentially be affiliated with. Another quote specifically to give you some context on the safety point. Quote, advertisers' trust in the platform has plunged in the past year to just 4% of marketers saying that advertising on X was, quote, brand safe, compared to a 39% for Google, reflecting widespread concerns, end quote. So there is clearly in this survey that the Financial Times is referring to or pointing to, there is clearly a level of concern within marketers. However, after doing research, because I did question, was it, are people pulling back on advertising as a whole? Because that could be a reason. That could be a reason why X is potentially seeing a loss in, advertising spend or money being made from advertising on the platform. And I found a couple of interesting bits of specific and things to consider about these stats. Is the majority of the stat will be from larger businesses who spend a lot more money, so it will be skewed towards your larger businesses because they will spend a large percentage of that pool of money, so they will have a larger percentage. Specifically, it doesn't break it down here, unfortunately, but it is a growing industry still. And to quote, a recent study said that the market value of advertising in the UK is expected to be 27.74 billion in 2027, with the potential growth rate to be 10% from 10.4.5% from 23-24. And again, so this would be the annual growth rate across e-commerce as well, would be around 10.5%, thanks to the rise in e-commerce and mobile device usage of shopping and information access. And on a more global front as well, another finding shows $870 billion would likely be spent by 2027 worldwide. So clearly we've got like 27 billion being spent in the UK on advertising, and then you've got 870 billion across the world. So clearly there's lots of money still being thrown into advertising. And the honest truth is probably because advertising works when done correctly. Now, can we optimize what we're doing? Can we specifically look at, you know, those platforms? And that might be the shift, right? So it'll be interesting to see how Elon does, quote unquote, fix this financial concern or financial worry that X is in at the moment. Because as I've already alluded to and as I've already reported, there is a conversation at the moment in advertising circles and advertising surveys in the bigger advertising companies about, is X a safe platform for their clients and their brands that they advertise with to put their money and put their dollars and put their pounds for that advertising spend. So with X being potentially perceived as non-brand safe, where should a business put their advertising money, advertising spend? There was part of this Financial Times article that will be linked down below in the source notes. I did talk about the fact that at the moment one of the most innovative platforms is actually TikTok from an advertising point of view, but also the most trustworthy ad platform seems to be becoming YouTube, which might lean into the previous story where we talked about the fact that YouTube is gaining in streaming percentage on television. So is YouTube becoming the new mainstream ad platform where you'll be served an ad followed by the content you're actually wanting to watch? And or do we have more control with things like a YouTube Premium, where you can pay in to basically not have any ads? So that is going to cover up that story. But if you have an opinion, have a thought, have some things to consider, do let me know in the comment section down below on where potentially you're looking to spend your money when it comes to advertising, or where your clients are potentially looking to spend their money in 2020, the rest of 2024, but into 2025 as well. In an update to the story that we've been covering for all of the episodes so far, as long as this series has existed, there's been reports that X was still, after 5 days of being officially banned in Brazil, it was still the top of the ISO App Store, so the Apple App Store. It was still at the top. Allegedly, the only reason I can see why it still would be if people are using VPNs and potentially not getting fined from doing so, because there was talk about fining people using VPNs to still use X in the jurisdiction. This week we also saw that Brandon Carr send a quite in-depth letter to his counterparts in the Brazilian telecoms industry. Now, those who don't know, Mr. Carr is specifically high up in the FFC, which is the regulatory body in America for communications and how we go about them. You know, they're quite similar to Ofcom in the UK. Within this letter, he also implies or says that the threats to pull Starlink's licenses and authority, or those approvals from those regulators in Brazil, was actually unlawful under Brazil's own constitution and your own country's statutory requirements against anti-government corruption, as well as also sharing the view about Brazil that in fact, quote, in fact, the US business leaders are now openly questioning whether Brazil is on the path to becoming an uninvestable market. He also added that Brazilians should not be put up to the government suppressing a specific political viewpoint, end quote. He does end the letter by requesting a meeting to, quote, resolve these issues, end quote. The full letter I will link down below as well. So there's clearly mounting pressure, and it does actually sound as if that quite a lot of what Alex is doing is very illegal, if not slightly illegal, in that respect, and it does seem as to be quote-unquote government overreach, you could say, in that respect. So I'm sure many of you and I are watching, no matter whether you agree with the ban or not. I would feel that you would hope that Alex specifically is going to have to go after the ban legally, and wouldn't want to do anything unlegally to do so. And as I alluded to, and as some of the articles that I referenced in last show kind of made the feeling that he was going after anything that he could related to Elon, and not looking at, okay, well, X is the thing that I've got a problem with, or I have an issue with, and I'm going to shut that down. And then over here we've got Starlink, that is a separate company, separate shareholders, happens to be owned by the same person. But should I enforce that? Now, Starlink did muddy the waters specifically by not making very clear from the beginning that they would uphold the ban. So I guess your counter argument there could be that by them doing that, they potentially left the court in a position where if it didn't act, then it would be perceived as saying, oh, well, yeah, Starlink, that's fine, just walk around our ban and don't enforce it. But was it a bit heavy-handed, you could say, from Alex specifically to potentially, you know, go after those assets of Starlink and basically cease them to be able to operate as a business? And fair play to them, they still offered free internet access because they literally cannot, you know, all their assets are frozen, all of their bank accounts are frozen, so they can't transact with any of their customers to be able to get their deposits or to get their monthly subscriptions or to get their product specifically paid for. But they were very, very clear in the respect to they're gonna keep their Brazilian customers online. And as I alluded to in last show as well, there is a percentage of Brazil that really do rely on Starlink to stay connected to the internet because of the geo nature of how Brazil is. There is only a few providers that can actually have 100% internet coverage across the region, because Starlink being one of them, because of the way that, you know, you've got a lot of jungle, you've got a lot of other difficult terrains that exist within Brazil as well. Adding to the pressure pushing on the Brazilian authorities, specifically Senator Marcos Rubio released the following statement as well after hearing about the X ban. Quote, "For some time, I've heard about the ongoing government censorship campaign in Brazil. The recent decision to ban X undermines basic freedoms from individuals and private entities who wish to seek information from X, and imposing a legal censorship campaign. The people of Brazil are facing a very serious crackdown on engaging in social media platforms for the sake of basic freedoms and a bipartisan relationship. Brazil should basically undo this move or think about this next move very carefully." And that's something that we're seeing from some quite powerful people or quite notable people inside the US government, and as I said, the US governing regulators as well. So it looks like potentially there may be some reaction from investment into the country from government sources, but also private sector as well, regarding this quote-unquote going after freedom of speech, because America notoriously has the First Amendment and was built on the concept of freedom of expression and freedom of speech. We also in the UK have laws regarding the freedom of expression specifically, and protecting those specific rights is important to both of those nations, because it is perceived and known that it's one of the only ways that you can have a free, open, democratic society, if you're allowed to critique what the government is doing and not have a quote-unquote totalitarian state. Now, arguably, you could say, and some people have reported, that the current state of affairs in the UK at the moment is moving closer to a totalitarian state. I'm not going to get into whether it is or isn't, but some people have said that. And I think it's important to ask ourselves and establish, is if that is true, is that a way we want to go as a country? Is that a way we want to go as a community? And by the sound of it, it definitely looks like the US doesn't want to see government corruption and you know, high levels of censorship regarding the information and what can and can't be discussed. Now, there's a difference, I think, and I think we need to be very careful, and this is why we talk about it and why we're talking about misinformation and why the conversation is so loud at the moment, is there is a difference between factually not correct and an opinion that doesn't actually connect or align with the more popular view, and I think they're very different. I think we need to tackle them very differently. And of course, by the way, this goes without saying that this isn't necessarily true on 95% of platforms, because a platform is a private entity and a private business and can choose to cease service like you would in a restaurant or any other business. Excuse me. You know, they can say, no, we don't want you here for any reason or etc. But there should be a process and there should be transparency on why that reasoning is, in my view, and why and how the people, the account, the people who made the decision, the platform, the organization should take accountability for the decisions they make as well. Within last week's show, I also talked about the fact that there was potentially going to be calls for a large quote-unquote freedom march or freedom movement to take place, and it does look like a large gathering did take place, but from the research that I can do, it was mostly to show political support rather than the full rally to necessarily be about freedom of speech, although it was mentioned and a percentage of the crowd were there for that reason. It's unclear at this stage to see whether the whole thing was done specifically for freedom of speech. In 95% of cases in the articles and the researches I've actually done on this at the moment up to this show, and I'll leave what I have written down below, it sounded like it was more specifically, I'm going to support X person in politics. I'm going to expect this person's view, and it was their supporters and their fans and their people who would support their ideology, rather than necessarily, which part of which is freedom of expression, freedom of movement, freedom of speech specifically, and freedom of expression, that they would be there. So it was kind of mixed. It wasn't solely a freedom march, as has been alluded to by some people on X, but it also wasn't solely not to do with that either. So like many things, it's nuanced, and like many things, it's mixed. But at the moment, that's all we know. There is other stuff that I didn't talk about necessarily, other opinions and other points of view that I'll leave down in the description down below. Some other articles I found really, really useful, but I didn't want to necessarily bring quotes in or talk about them specifically, but they'll be down in the description down below for those who are interested. Thank you ever so much for listening to this topic. And we're now going to move on to business news. We had a brief update from Instagram Business this week talking about, is there a golden number of reels that you can post? And I was expecting the post to be a little bit more in depth, to be honest with you, but I'll share the information that's on the post, and you can take or leave it. They found that creators, quote, creators with the greatest net following growth rate we see, on average, they post 10 or more reels per month. They also say creating is a marathon, not a sprint, so make sure that you're not letting your short-term goals go or hurt your well-being, which I think is obvious, and I think is something which everyone would agree with. But what it's saying, and I think this is the thing I would say about growth, the thing I would say about any specifically Instagram, but also anywhere on social media, it's about, firstly, and I was having a conversation yesterday with a new connection on LinkedIn about this, and I think it's about understanding that there is no golden bullet on social media, or in content, or in advertising in general. The reason why we use digital advertising, the reason why we use these social platforms, is because they give us a lot of data, right? So the job of you, if you're starting a campaign or starting a new business, or whether you've been in business for a while and you've got a new service and you're trying to market that, is let's get market feedback. So let's put some stuff out there, right? And you can use the structure of hook, content, call to action, which is great and really, really works. But some hooks are going to work really well for you, others won't. The same with the content, the same with the ideas, the same with the concepts. So my best advice is, yes, look at what these platforms are doing. So we've heard from Instagram Business this week. They say, well, you should be doing about 10 posts a month, right? Okay, sure, but if you want to gain data quickly and you can sustain it, I would say do as many reels as you possibly can, right, without sacrificing quality, right? Now, you can then, because what happens then is you can put loads out, you can gain some data, you can tweak and then start being very scientific with it. So, okay, so I've got 5 hooks. Now I'm going to take basically the same concepts of videos, or similar topics of videos, but only change the hooks. And we're going to see which one either has higher retention on our retention chart, or what one has more views or more comments or more likes or more shares or more opt-ins or more calls books, etc. Whatever your key performance indicator is going to be for that piece of content. Is it brand awareness? Is it to nurture? Is it to sell, etc.? These are all things we need to think about when creating content, but I think it's really important to, as I said, have that mix between that science-based approach and trying some new creative decisions. And at the end of the day, who are you talking to? How can you add value to them? How you can consistently show up for them? And then potentially how could you monetize that audience, or potentially monetize them through either advertising directly to them or getting them to potentially buy into either subscription-based model that we're seeing similarly to X, but also with others like Patreon and YouTube also having these options, and of course Twitch and so on. You know, there's ways, once you have the audience and you understand what they want and you've added some value, but you actually have to earn that time, you have to earn that respect, you have to earn that point of view. So hopefully this insight helps you to continue to create for Instagram in a better way. But again, remember, the Instagram for business accounts at on average 10 or more reels per month is a great option and a great plan. In TikTok news, there was a smaller bit news on a new study that suggests that public support for banning TikTok, which we detailed in the first show, is kind of waning. You know, people are kind of unsure, or this could be one of those things where it's just taken longer to get to the point and get to where we are with it. But to quote the study, or the peer review study specifically, to quote, the share of Americans who support the US government banning TikTok now stands at 32%. That is down from 38% in the fall of 23 and 50% in March of 23. Meanwhile, with 28% opposing to the ban, up from 22% in March of 23 as well. So it sounds like that pendulum is potentially swinging the other way now, and there, especially as TikTok is going through the legal process to fight the ban, but also talking a lot more about how it is or isn't sharing data, we might actually see that it will be able to win and will be able to actually, you know, not be sold off and be able to continue in the American market. However, at the moment, from a legal standpoint, because there's a difference between public opinion and then the legal realities that the US government is pushing on TikTok, it is still, however, quite likely that TikTok will need to A, sell off to a US owner, or B, likely get banned around the start of 2025. However, as I reported in the first video on this topic, it could change dramatically depending on who actually wins the US election in November, because that is going to drastically change. Donald Trump has said he's going to basically not do the ban specifically. So if he wins, then hurrah for those who want for keeping TikTok in the US and keeping it going as it is. But then also, if the Democrats win, they pretty much said they're going to go for it. They're going to go for the jugular. They're going to move forward with this ban. So we'll see what happens. If there is any other news on that TikTok ban, I'll be sure to update you as soon as I possibly can. Also, in TikTok news, we also saw reports from Social Media Today and TikTok itself highlighting the improvements to safety worries about teenagers on the app. The first of them was to create a digital safety partnership that looks to, quote, establish clear boundaries and parameters for social media use. This is to add to the rest of the safety features for teenagers that TikTok already has, such as, I think there's some blacklists or etc. that you can add as a parent, and then there's also things like your traditional parental controls on the app, limiting time, limiting kind of content, etc. But I think it's part of TikTok's want to have an open dialogue with parents and to understand potentially the damage, quote, the potential damage of online content as well, to limit and help deal with now what do we class as potential damage for online content? Is that them being potentially introduced or shown a view that their developing minds may not fully understand and maybe take literally, or take satire literally, or etc. It's unclear. They haven't specifically said in these bits of articles, or this article specifically, they haven't actually said what online content they're referring to. So I would love to hear a little bit more from them, hopefully, about what that online content is that they count as the potential dangers. So what are these dangers, etc. TikTok has also launched a brand new TV campaign that showcases what they're doing, and they've also more recently established a youth council to help basically talk to what the youth council is basically TikTok's conversation with their youth council, which is a group of young people who say what really does work and what they really do care about on the platform as well. So that was a quick update on TikTok safety as well. Do you feel TikTok is as safe as it could be, or do we need more provisions and more tools like what it's sounding like TikTok is moving towards to help us protect our children or our young people? Or are you closer to why the hell are children potentially on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, etc.? Should they have child versions of these apps? These are things which have all been discussed, related to social media, related to the reality when it comes to impressionable children coming full circle. One of the reasons why Mr. Beast is being so critiqued, as we did in the first story and will continue through the shows, is his audience is very impressionable. They are children, etc. in that respect as well. But that is going to wrap up this week in social media. So thank you ever so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video and you would like to not miss this week in social media, we'll be talking about what's happened next week in social media, then make sure to be subscribed. Thank you ever so much for watching. I'd love to hear what you think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you very, very soon.